Hi, my name is Amy. Thank you very much for watching, and let's make some bad financial decisions together. This is for entertainment purposes only, so if you're entertained, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. So, today I was invited to participate in the wolf trading space where YieldMax they do their distribution announcements and they do a roundtable every Wednesday. And they asked me to come up, and at the very end, I asked some questions. But I do like attending those because they do a lot of announcements then, and I get a lot of insight to what the team is thinking. So, one of the first things that they updated us on was ULTY, which is, everyone's favorite problem child. By the way, none of this is a recommendation for any of the funds that I'm going to be talking about today. Do your own research, read the prospectus, all that stuff. Anyways, so I think they said that they got out of Rigetti with like 100% gain on it, but they did get out of Lucid as well. So they mentioned two funds that because they rotated the funds out. And one of the biggest announcements that they had today, for me at least, is they're changing the method for what they do for inclusion into ULTY. So that means that they're going to include some more mega cap game names. And I felt heard because I recently made a video about how they don't really need to make a change to like the prospectus to ULTY, change how it's actually run. They just need companies with better fundamentals and, let the growth happen naturally. So I'm glad that they're listening, even if it feels like it's slow. And the reason for that is because they are a business. They don't want to be making changes based on emotions. They want to be doing it very methodically and making sure that they have actual rules that they're following when they choose what stocks to include in ULTY. So I'm glad they're giving it serious thought, that they are taking us seriously when we say like, hey, this needs to be an above $5 stock. So hopefully those changes that I think they said that it should be in a couple of weeks changed, that we see a different in the composition of what makes up ULTY, and that in turn helps what we're seeing with the price action of ULTY. So the next thing that they really hammered in was WNTR, which is the inverse of MISTY. And I'd have to go back and look at and hear the actual, like, here's what your total return is. Here's what it is if you just took the distributions and didn't reinvest it at all. But one thing is, I think you're up like 57% on winter, and you're up like 40% if you didn't reinvest anything in winter. And in the same time period, I think I didn't catch what they did with Misty, but yeah, Misty's down because that's what happens when the underlying loses, 30% of its value. But then they were talking about, well, if you had owned it 50-50, then your total return between the two of them, you would be up 9%. And I literally wrote down, but no. So, if you're bullish in the long term for an underlying, then being 50-50 is basically putting it in a strangle. And so the most that I would do is like an 80-20, where like 20% is in the inverse. But with Misty, there was a really big downtrend. So maybe if you were nervous about losing the NAV, you would take some of your Misty out, put it into winter, and then as you got the winter distributions, which this week it's at 125% yield, so you could take your distribution and buy Misty to improve your cost basis on Misty and just keep rebalancing in the proportion that you want. And I'm not saying like 80-20 is a hard set rule. It's just a rule of thumb. You could do 90-10 or, 30-70. I mean, you could do 50-50, or you could do, as soon as there's a really big shorting of your favorite underlying, you take all your Misty out and you put into winter and you rebalance it yourself. So I think in conclusion, with this, because I did wind up, before there was major downward action on Misty, I did establish my 10% in winter. And I'm actually pretty glad that I did, because now I'm selling winter because it's too much of a proportion of my portfolio. But it does result in me earning less money because I'm not earning 125% interest. But I have not been investing it back into Misty because my margin account is still very over leveraged. So I've been putting it into gold. But in a perfect world, you would have your Misty and your winter position. And when you're feeling bullish on strategy, you would have more in Mister. And when you're feeling bearish on strategy, maybe you would allocate, like sell some of your Misty, put into winter, so that you can take the distributions winter and put it into Misty. And then when you're feeling bullish again, you could, rebalance your winter and your Misty position. So they said that ULTY is not in any danger of getting delisted the price that it is right now. And they weren't able to answer more about that, because if they were going to do a reverse split, it would have to be through an announcement, which makes sense. But personally, if they can get the price above $5 and then they announce the reverse split, that way I can do options on ULTY. And they put ULTY at like $20 or $25, even $30, not $50. I wouldn't do options on ULTY with $50, but I would do options on ULTY. Like, I would sell puts. I would do the wheel on ULTY, because if I lose and I don't roll it forward, then at least I'm making, the 80-90% distribution. I think that would be really great. So then, lastly, I asked a really stupid question. And I was really upset with myself about that. But I'm going to explain why I asked it. Well, it's because I asked X what they wanted me to ask the fund managers. And I wrote it down and I read my notes to them, so it didn't come out correctly. And then it was also a stupid question on top of that. So I guess we'll just take ownership of it, and I'll stop crying. So this goes back to my own fundamental understanding of how poor man cover calls work and how YieldMax works in general. But the question that I took from Twitter that I was trying to ask was, these funds, they're working the way they're supposed to work, but in a downward market, when momentum begets momentum, so if based on actual market conditions, is there anything that we can do to these single stock funds to help with now the price stability and the NAV erosion? So I threw out there, like, would it be possible to, own some of the underlying, that way we're not spending money on establishing the synthetic, which apparently is a very stupid question. So anyways, so what is a synthetic poor man's cover call? And I'm showing you retirement dividends this video because this really helped me way back when I was researching YieldMax to begin with and trying to figure out, like, what does it do? Like, I can't invest in something I don't understand what it's doing. That's not good practice. And I watched retirement dividends for months, him going over the trades, just so that I felt more comfortable and understood on a deeper level what my investment was. So when you buy a call, it gives you the right to purchase at a given price, but not the obligation. But it costs money. You pay when you buy. And then, and they do it at the money, which means it's the price that the stock is right now. They buy a call there. And then they do a naked puts, which means there's no like money collateral obligation behind the puts. But when you sell a put, you're agreeing to buy the stock at that price if the price of the stock goes below that value. And you get money when you sell a put. But between these things, when you buy a call and you sell a put, there's a debit spread. And when there's a debit spread, that means you're still paying money, okay? It's still a negative amount of money. So if the market is flat, slightly up, then you're making money from the next leg, which is you sell cover calls on that position, because together, when you buy a call and you sell a put at the same strike price, that is a single position, so you can sell calls on top of that. So in a perfect world, the stock is just slightly going up and you don't hit the ceiling that cover call gives you. So the second scenario with this is, what if the underlying goes up more than the strike that they put for the cover call, which YieldMax puts it quite close to the money because they're trying to return the implied volatility to us, the investors. So if it runs up past that, well, it's a good thing we have call spreads because once it, like, there's a no man's land of whatever the spread is for the call, that we don't see the price appreciation. But once it's past that spread, the stock price will appreciate. So you don't earn more money, but the NAV itself goes up. So it's like kind of a win. But before they didn't have the call spreads, you just hit that ceiling and you don't appreciate in price anymore. Sorry, you lost out. But there is another way that, well, like there's three ways that YieldMax can make money. So when the price goes past the call, then the price of the synthetic, when YieldMax goes to roll it, is actually appreciated in value. So they actually have profit from the synthetic position. And so what, from my observation of what retiring dividends was going through, and my own understanding is sometimes, like, the YieldMax team would lose their bet on the cover call, which would cap us hard, but the synthetic ran up enough that the price of the underlying stock, like, we made profit, and so the YieldMax team was able to return us the premiums that we earned from doing the cover calls without it negatively impacting the price of the stock. So before we move on, there's a couple of things I'd like to say about this. When you buy a call, let's say you bought it and you paid $100. When you sell a put at the same strike price, you might get $80. So then the spread there, to me, the debit spread is the $20. So it still cost you $20 overall to establish the position, even if, you know, the $20 is way less than the $100 you initially paid for the bot call. So there's that. And then the problem with putting the cover call that you put on really close to the money and losing the trade is that YieldMax doesn't do the wheel strategy. They settle with cash. So when, like, if they close the position and it's in the money, they'd actually lose money on that cover call contract, because it's gained value because the value of the underlying has gone up. So they could actually lose quite a bit of money when closing a trade when they lose the bet. However, when the synthetic goes up and when they've rolled that position and they've made enough money, then, it kind of neutralizes that loss and we wind up with more profit, and we can still get the premium without the price of the NAV, of the actual stock price being affected negatively. So this question that I asked was mostly for when we're in a down market, or if there's momentum and it's been 3 months and we've lost 30% of the NAV, can we change something up so that we don't lose as much money? And so my question was like, it does cost money to establish a synthetic. Maybe we could have a portion of it in the stock, because when the stock goes down, like, you don't have to keep paying to open up synthetic positions. And the synthetic does act like the stock. So the price will go up and down, but you have to pay money to establish that. So it just cannibalizes the fund faster, because in a down market, you're paying for the synthetic, but the synthetic's not making money because the asset itself's not appreciating. So it doesn't make up for the cost of creating the synthetic, which is why a lot of people prefer to be in ETFs that actually own the underlying, and then they write cover calls on top of it. At least that's my understanding of it. But also, and they told me no pretty thoroughly, and I'm going to rewatch it and just make sure that I understand exactly. But when you do a poor man's cover call, even with the cost of the synthetic, the volume of contracts that you can do in order to write cover calls on it is so great that, the price of the synthetic is pretty nominal. So, in conclusion, if we are reading the room and the room says that we are now bearish on the stock, it is up to us to actually hedge it with things like winter, or just a plain old inverse ETF of the single stock, and use the profits from that to buy back into the single stock if we are, because like in the long run, 2-3 years from now, I believe its price is going up in the long term. It's just in the meantime, I don't want my NAV to go to zero on Misty. So if you have it hedged all the time, or have like a little hedge all the time, and then when there is large downward pressure, you increase it more, and then you just use the profits from that to buy back into the underlying that you're ultimately bullish on, then you can protect your own NAV according to YieldMax. And that's just generally how that works. So also, in funds that do have synthetic positions, like, I could have sworn that things like 5e, they have it written into the prospectus that if they want to do tax loss harvesting on one of their 5 positions, they can own the underlying and do their own cover calls on the underlying for 31 days while they are tax loss harvesting for us. So I don't know. It was a stupid question, and I'm embarrassed, and it'll be fine. I'll be fine. But I'm always happy to take questions and ask and get access to the YieldMax leadership and get things answered for you all. So, anyways, today on Financial Philharmonics, we have my personal finance spot. Basically, because of YouTube's new policies about what we can and cannot talk about, I just wanted to put in a song that is a disclaimer for Financial Philharmonics that maybe getting financial advice from a song is not the best approach. So, but just, listen to it and bop to it. Just don't get influenced by it. Thank you very much. And then I did update, this is actually localhost. I updated YieldMight with today's distributions for YieldMax and not for Defiance because they haven't emailed us, and I'm not sure if they know that like GLDY is not, I have not gotten their email in a couple of weeks. So I've gotten it for other funds, just not the ones that declare on Wednesday. So anyways, I'm working on updating Wednesday, and do you prefer ETFs that use synthetics, or do you prefer the ones that have actually owning the underlyings? And I'll talk to you later. Bye. None of this is financial advice. Can't believe you think that a song would have all the details you need to make an informed decision. Sometimes we need to slow down and consider, please consider that getting financial advice from a song is ludicrous. Just consider, please be considerate. Cause I need you to hear me out. Don't be influenced, that be discussing just a personal finance spot. A little better budget and a little bit of discipline. Just a personal finance spot. This personal finance spot. My personal finance spot.